Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another week of blockchain gaming news with me, Jenny Jordan, and my co-host, John Jordan. Today is Friday, the 7th of November, and we got quite a list of news to get through. So grab a coffee or tea and enjoy. Right, we're going to start talking about Animoca Brands and the fairly big news that they are planning a Nasdaq listing, which that isn't the news, but they are doing it in a slightly different way than kind of expected. They are planning like a reverse Nasdaq listing with a 2.4 billion valuation, and they're going together with the company Currenc. Is that what they're called? Yeah. I'll let you spin out the
This is one of those stories that I've just been waiting for. It's a proper John story. So we've known for a while that Animoca, Yat said he was thinking about IPOing because obviously, in the current climate in America, it's very different under Trump than what it was before. And Animoca, was a listed company, a company where you could buy shares of it in Australia back in 2020 when it was a mobile game developer, and it was just started to go to crypto, and it was still listed on there. It was a very small. I remember at the time I did actually try to buy some shares in Animoca back then. It was a tiny company, like a 10 million market cap, something like that. Obviously, all the crypto stuff sort of blew up, and it actually got kicked off that Australian exchange because the Australian exchange either didn't understand properly what crypto was or thought crypto at that stage was really dodgy, depending on who you talk to. And so basically they got delisted. So they sort of, and that's sort of a little bit weird because, if you're a private company, then, people do own the shares, like maybe obviously the founders and probably the employees own some, and maybe the investors own some. So there are people who own the shares, but they're not very liquid. So you can trade them, but it's sort of quite hard to do. If you're on a sort of an exchange, what an exchange does is make your shares liquid. So basically anyone with a brokerage account or these days Robinhood or anything like that can just trade your shares anywhere in the world. Makes it much more liquid, and obviously you raise money often doing that. But so Animoca's been in this weird situation where it has been listed. It has sort of a shareholding that is quite much broader than a private company would be, but the shares have been quite liquid, even as the shares have probably gone up. I mean, it's very hard to get a price on them because they haven't been liquid. But I'd be amazed if they're not gone up like 100 times because the valuation has gone up from tens of millions to billions. So all these shareholders have been sitting on this sort of massive, capital gain, and you, as I say, because it has been public and now it's private, you probably can sell them out, or probably you can, if you're very sophisticated, use them with a bank to get a loan because things like that. So there has been this sort of situation, but obviously Animoca over the years there have been rumours about it wanting to launch in various places. There was a rumour a couple of years ago it was going to go into Europe somewhere. Obviously it's a Hong Kong based company really. So maybe it could have gone in the Hong Kong exchange. They're very close to the Hong Kong regulators. They're doing a stable coin with them and stuff. But obviously the big place to go is America. So that's sort of the long lead up to this. So we've just known Yatsu, the executive chairman, is very open about this sort of stuff. So it's been interesting to hear him sort of spouting off, and I've spoken to him a few times as well. I had him on the podcast. So it just sort of makes sense. So the different ways they could have done it is they could have done an IPO. So basically they launch as a new company, and there's a process for doing that, and you sort of get bankers involved, and they decide what the price is going to be and all this sort of stuff. And that is a process of doing it. It's not necessarily a quick process, but it is sort of a well understood process. What they've done is something different, which is called they're basically, there's a company already existing on the Nasdaq called, as you say, Currenc. Actually spelt like currency with a C at the end rather than a Y. And they're actually a Hong Kong based company. So they do, if you look into what they do, they're a pretty small company. They do sort of like some finance sort of technology. Like everyone these days, they say they're very AI focused. How AI focused they are, I don't know. They actually themselves did a SPAC. So they got floated on the Nasdaq by SPACs are basically companies just with cash, and they go out and basically you sort of reverse into them. I won't go into the details, but it's basically sort of what Animoca are doing. So they did that only last year. Hasn't been very successful. Their share price went down very low. So at one point last year, they were valued at like $25 million, which is much smaller than the sort of obviously you get on the exchange to like blow your valuation up, not have it shrink down as they had it done. So obviously they were sort of a company sort of in problems. And obviously Animoca, I guess, with their bankers and their lawyers and stuff, have been looking for what's the best way for us to do it. Is it best to do a clean IPO as us as a company, or in some ways it's sort of easier to do this reverse merger. In some ways, as we'll get into, it's actually potentially more complicated, particularly in this case. Anyway, they've announced start of this week that they are basically going to reverse. So Animoca is a much bigger company than this Currenc. This Currenc basically is a bit of a non-starter. So what's actually going to happen is Animoca is going to sort of reverse into this Currenc company. Most of the business of Currenc, as it currently is going to be spun out into a separate company, which won't be worth very much and probably won't be on the Nasdaq because it's just like a bit of a non-starter. There's no synergies between the two companies. They're just basically Animoca is just basically like a boa constrictor eating a water buffalo to get the it's a bad analogy. But anyway, and what happens is the current Currenc shareholders, they will get 5% of the new Animoca Brands company, and Animoca Brands shareholders will have 95% of the new company. So that's sort of how the Currenc shareholders will vote for it because they're going to get a payout. And in fact, you can also, what's interesting is because Animoca Brands shares aren't on Nasdaq, but Currenc shares are on Nasdaq. So if you basically assume the Currenc shares are basically going to give you that's going to be worth. They're going to give you 5% of Animoca. You can sort of treat it as a proxy. So some people clearly have been buying Currenc shares, not because they care about Currenc, because they think Animoca is going to come in, and then obviously then you sort of try and value how much is Animoca worth. And you mentioned that 2.4 billion. That's just a back of the envelope figure that I put together based on the share price of Currenc before the Animoca Brands deal was announced, and then that is 5% of what the current of what Animoca will be. So
it's very difficult to say with valuation though, because of the projects within the Animoca kind of ecosystem, their partner projects and companies, the
yes.
sort of tokens and stuff there. It's impossible to say what they're worth, isn't it?
Not impossible, no. Well, it is. But as we know, they announced their financials last year, and they had a revenue of like $310 million. And they had, they didn't break it out because they're not a public company, so they don't break it out quite in a transparent way. But they had sort of gross profit, you might say, about $100 million. So that's pretty good. That's like, a 30% margin. That's not bad. They weren't growing very fast. And I guess the sort of problem with Animoca is a lot of its stuff is based around sort of obviously that sort of cryptocurrency activity. So, this year's been sort of, up to this point at least, sort of good for Bitcoin, but not very good for things that aren't Bitcoin. So whether Animoca is going to do as well this year as last year, we don't know because they haven't done the audited accounts yet. But they do have like tons of sort of crypto assets. So they have about $1 billion of cash, stable coins, stuff like ETH, fairly liquid, non-speculative assets. Obviously everything's speculative in crypto, so ETH, has gone down quite a lot this week. But they have about $1 billion of stuff that's probably going to be worth $1 billion, and they could just sell it into the marketplace. So they're going to be, the company's going to be worth at least $1 billion because of that. The company's going to be worth something because it has a business that does stuff that normally maybe we can say made $100 million last year. That may be up or down on different years, but it's making profit, so that you can value that. The difficult thing is it has these sort of what they say are sort of illiquid tokens. So obviously stuff like the Sandbox, that is still, Animoca probably will still have, you probably look up the details, but they will still have like tens of millions of Sand tokens, which are worth something because they have a price, but Animoca can't sell those, or can't really sell a lot of those, because if they do, they're going to, the price will go down. So it's that's the stuff that's hard to value. They have this education system called Edu, is it? I think, and they have a load of tokens for that. They have, these much smaller sort of projects like AnyChess, and they have all these 600 investments into companies some of which they may have some of which they may be the main investor in, but they don't sort of control. And again, most of those companies will just wither away, and a lot of them have already. But in there, they a lot of game companies. Most of those are withered away, as we well know. But some of them are sort of infrastructure companies, just blockchain companies. Probably some AI stuff in there. That Animoca did go very wide in its investment strategy, particularly in these sort of early years. So I say most of those will literally go to zero. But if you've done 600, it's not inconceivable that 50 of them will do okay, and maybe 10 of them will like 100x. So if Animoca's put like a couple of million into something that's got 100x, that suddenly, that's the difficulty. So obviously, if you're sort of bullish on this, you can at any point sort of look at the stock of currency and basically work out what that means for Animoca Brands. It's currently about 4 billion, I think. So if you think that Animoca's actually worth 10 billion, then obviously you buy up a lot of that stock. If you think it's worth, I would, on a sort of conservative level, I would say probably about 3 to 3.5 is what you value Animoca at the moment. Obviously, it's very based on crypto sentiment, which is maybe coming off a little bit. But you can make that calculation. So that's what's interesting. But the other thing is the whole process is going to take a long time. So if Animoca and Currenc have an exclusive period of 3 months where they have to sort of agree amongst themselves the exact legality of the deal and the precisely, like they said, it's a 95% split, but maybe does that change to 4.5 to 95.5 for some reason, or they have to sort it out amongst themselves. Obviously, they're really keen. Animoca's really keen to be on Nasdaq, and Currenc basically gets a payout for doing nothing, for giving them their company, which wasn't doing very well. So they're all smiles. But after that's agreed, then obviously the shareholders will have to agree. So Animoca shareholders, why would they not agree? They're going to get a massive payout. Currenc shareholders, why would they not agree? They're going to get a massive payout. The tricky bit comes in for regulators. So obviously the Nasdaq have to double check everything's okay. Currenc is currently headquartered in the Cayman Islands, which is a place where lots of people do that sort of stuff. Is that it's not anything dodgy, but it's easier regulation. So they have to agree it. I don't think that those will be problems. Probably not. Probably the difficult one will be the Australians, because obviously they fell out with Animoca back in the day. Obviously, crypto's a lot different now, but Animoca is set up as a company under Australian law, even though they don't really have any activity in Australia or any developers or anything there anymore. So that would be the sort of one that may be tricky. So there is a sort of a non-trivial percentage chance that the whole deal just won't come through. I think that's unlikely. I think it's not quite a rubber stamp, but it's in everyone's interest is to basically go, because they're going to get a massive payout, which is why they probably chose, they wouldn't choose this if they thought it was legally difficult. But it's still going to say they're going to take 9 to 12 months, they say. That's what Yat says. So they're sort of targeting the fact that this new Animoca company will be live in the Nasdaq, sort of this time next year. So, and that's a long time for weird things to happen. We're in events are always happening, I suppose. So maybe we shouldn't overplay the fact that more events are going to happen in the next year than happened in the past year. But even crypto is very volatile at the moment, and people talking about is there going to be a recession in America? Is the AI bubble going to burst? Or, so there's a whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with this deal that may impact it. So then it'd be good for us. It'd give us lots of sort of things to write about for the next next 6 months.
No, but as you say, crypto is volatile, sort of inherently in its nature, and the world is currently quite shaky. I think we sort of learned that with the pandemics and wars and stuff, that it's not in any way immune to very strong economic sort of ups and downs. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Right, let's move on. Talk about Moonfrost, which. Quite a lot of the backstory, but this week it became official that it is. So Moonfrost will become a entire sort of Web2 game, launching on Steam, and then going to spin out a sort of Web3 kind of degen game platform, Frost Arcade. What are you laughing about?
Right, yeah, no, exactly right.
Kind of going very much with the trend. Maybe it's exactly the right thing to do, realizing what's not working, stopping that, pivoting, or is it just kind of another developer without a strong vision and just going where the kind of wind blows. Tell us your thoughts.
So I do know Rick and Gina. I mean, not tremendously well, but I sort of I know them. Sort of occasionally meet them at conferences, and we sort of chew the fat, so to speak. So as you say, Moonfrost. I mean, it has been around for a while actually. Probably it's like 2022. I'm thinking. So it was sort of in that wave of when everyone was announcing games, and they're an experienced team. Rick's worked on a whole bunch of stuff. He's a somewhat more sort of technical guy. He was a CTO of a company called Bossa back in the day as well. So he's got good experience. So it sort of made sense they were putting together a new team, and Gina's very good at art. She's the art director. So they had actually worked on Stardew Valley. So that's a PC game, and they'd ported it, or they'd been part of a team that ported it to mobile. And that game was very sort of famous, very sort of loved as one of the first, what they call them now, sort of cozy RPGs. So you're not going around killing things. It's a cozy experience, and there's a quite a genre of the sort of games now. And it's sort of farming sort of stuff, and a bit sort of inspired by a lot of the Nintendo stuff, Animal Crossing, that sort of thing. So that was sort of the plan. They originally announced, or they were sort of raised money on the back of, or the time they raised the money, they said they're going to go on Solana. They didn't really actually have any NFTs, I think, back then. But they were sort of part of that wave of everyone going on Solana, because Solana was the new hot thing, and that was where all the money was being raised. And they sort of steadily worked. They were not sort of a showy team. They're quite a small team, didn't raise a ton of money, but they just sort of got on with it. And because Gina's a good art director, the visuals and everything were always they sort of stood out in sort of a type in the blockchain game sector where people were just doing things really fast and not really very caring about some of the fidelity of the thing. So I think slowly over the years it sort of built up. I wouldn't say like a massive following, but it definitely had a community, and definitely there was a deeper thing going on there than a lot of other games. But they were sort of quite quiet. They never sort of push stuff, and they weren't sort of shilling, and they haven't really done. They have done NFTs. I mean, so the slightly weird thing was last year they announced they were going to open loot blockchain, which is part of Big Time, and they're again a sort of an odd team. I mean, they're sort of experiencing crypto. The founder was one of the guys behind Decentraland, but they're not. I've always found them quite difficult to deal with on a personal level. Maybe that's me. But they were sort of an odd. Open, it was sort of an odd blockchain. It was sort of not really part of the crypto ecosystem. I felt that was a weird move for a game that was sort of not. There's probably people liked it for the game rather than the crypto bit of it. It didn't really have a lot of crypto degens attached to it because it was like a cozy game. They didn't do a lot of these sort of big NFT, PFP, or anything like that. I thought it was a weird move at the time, and sort of, I guess at that time, I don't know this because I haven't spoken to them recently, but you sort of think they were sort of thinking, where do we? I'm sure they got a grant to go there, so where do we get the money from, and how do we find our audience, and how does the blockchain work? And I think they were always a team that, I mean, Gina was never sort of crypto. I mean, she's like an art person, so she was focused on the art, and Rick was more on the crypto side. But I never got a feel they had a good sort of idea of integrating the blockchain into the game. If were they just going to be like a NFT and 2 tokens sort of copy pasta? They never really seemed to have that, but it seemed a little bit unclear how they were going to do that side of it, and that sort of increasingly became, I thought, clear when they moving to open loop was clearly a mistake because they've said they're coming off it now. And I guess like a lot of games, they've sort of gone, this just it's not coming together in the way we want. We want to make this sort of cozy RPG game, and that appeals actually to sort of not necessarily hardcore gamers, but gamers who are probably not going to like blockchain. So there's an audience problem there that lots of games have gone through, and the easiest thing is to go, right, we'll just ditch the blockchain. And they've sort of said in their stuff on Twitter that the Web 2 gamers want a good game and Web 3 gamers want to make money, and there is obviously broad truth in that. There is some nuance in there as well, but I think this decision, in hindsight, was always coming. And obviously people have complained and said you're grifters and blah, 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 and clearly they're not grifters. They're just trying to deal with a sort of difficult situation, and maybe, in the past they could have done stuff better. But it does make sort of sense that Moonfrost will be a premium PC game released on Steam. Whether they get a decent reception from the people who hate blockchain because they were associated with blockchain, sort of hard to judge. And if they had been just a Web 2 game, obviously they would have all these years building up a community and doing the sort of early access or the Steam stuff, and they're coming into that a little bit late, which makes it hard to build up the wish list, which is what you need to be part of the community on Steam and do a good launch. So the fact they made the decision now may be too late for the game. You say the interesting bit is they're coming out with this totally new Web 3 platform called Frost Arcade. So and that's what Rick's doing. So Gina's going to run the Web 2 bit, and Rick's going to run basically, they've not released a lot of details, but from what I can see, it's sort of going to be looking at what YGG have done with their LOL Land and their YGG Play sort of platform on Abstract, and it's going to be that sort of risk to earn model where you get sort of lots of people betting a small amount, and then you have multipliers on it, and it's all on chain for the sort of, it's a deterministic sort of outcome, and all the rewards are done sort of on chain out of a wager pot. And we've seen that with sort of Cambrian having their degen arena, or whatever it's called these days. That sort of stuff does work. Although equally, Frost Arcade is coming out of a cozy, the audience there will be a sort of cozy RPG audience. So again, just putting out a degen platform of mini games and big rewards, I mean, it could ignite people, but there's quite a lot of those sort of platforms out there at the moment. So I don't know how many degens there are to go around. They haven't announced what chain they're on. They just said they're coming off Open Loop. I imagine they go to Abstract because that's what everyone's doing at the moment. But that's just me making stuff up. They have also said they did release some NFTs. So those NFTs will have functionality in this new Frost Arcade, but the people who own those NFTs are not going to be the sort of people who want to play that game. So the whole thing's, a little bit disjointed, as these things sort of tend to be. I mean, I hope both parts of it will do well. It's sort of a sort of characteristic story that we sort of see a lot at the moment, where finally these underlying sort of tensions in projects sort of finally come to a head.
Yeah, and not everyone's taking the news the best way. People.
Well, it's Twitter, isn't it?
Bash out on Twitter about. Yeah. Anyway, so Immutable's IMX token has become the first blue chip gaming token to fully unlock. That means all of the tokens are now available. Nothing's locked up anymore. What does that mean? And what does that mean? And has it impacted the price at all?
No, I'm not. I mean, it's a symbolic thing. I'm not sure it means anything. I mean, did you say the one thing it means is there's no more tokens to be released onto the market? So, generally when tokens are released to investors or whoever, teams or whoever's had them, at this stage, most of the people just sell them. I mean, that's pretty standard. So in a sense, you reduce a little bit of sell pressure. But now's the case is you got, I think it's 3 billion they've got. I can't quite remember, but you've got 3 billion tokens out there spread on all these marketplaces, sitting in wallets. Okay, you've not got that extra sell pressure, but the sentiment around a project or the sentiment around crypto or crypto gaming is obviously going to drive the price. It's not like there's no more unlocks. The price is going to go up. In that sense, the price might go down a little less fast, I suppose, in the positive sense. I mean, the interesting thing is Immutable. I mean, still at like an $800 million market cap, which is sort of the biggest in sort of pure play sort of gaming, even though it hasn't really had any, you can't really point to any mad successes it's had, really. And the token's down 50% this year, but, that's actually not that bad compared to some of the other ones. So, I guess there is just a wider thing that some of it's taken it 4 years. So it shows sort of the cycle of blockchain gaming. So slowly these tokens are, I think Sandbox is at 82%, I think. So unlocked, that'll take a bit longer. Maybe that's another year, I don't know. So you are just sort of seeing from the tokenomic point of view that no one cares about anymore. There's nothing more to sell from those people. So, obviously the sort of the good thing is if sentiment did change and suddenly the price is going up, then there's no extra tokens coming on into selling to that. So, you can make the argument that it does on a sort of a secondary level improve situation, but it's not. Yeah, the price is not going to change on this news. It was quite interesting as a process just to have a quick go through and look at all the tokens. And it's interesting. I think actually Actis ASS token is actually, I think, only 62% unlocked still, and that launched earlier, so they got a really long unlock process. I don't think it's good or bad, but sort of interesting just to see how people have chosen different unlock times, durations.
Yeah. Good. Right. The Sandbox has announced that it's going to be a mainly UGC-focused platform in 2026. I mean, it's kind of news and not news, but because it is a UGC platform, it has had a lot of UGC. It's just that the UGC it had has been with major brands and kind of already established developers and such, whereas this UGC is going to be more for kind of native sandbox creators and individuals, isn't it? Am I right?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of weird. Just they haven't really publicised it very much. Really, it's sort of like a pre-announcement, I suppose. I mean, I think this is a good thing. I think. I mean, the Sandbox has relied much too much on brands and thought brands would do its heavy lifting for it, and I think that's become increasingly clear that that's sort of not the case, and that strategy, maybe it's too harsh to say was wrong, but in my nominal role as I often take as the CEO of Sandbox, in my time machine, I would have. I think if that thing was going to work as they hoped in the early days, it was going to have to be about UGC, so they should have pushed UGC a lot more. And to be fair, they did push a lot of UGC and they did fund a lot of UGC, but it just never really the seasons were never about UGC. The seasons were always about the big brands. So they have said next year, hopefully the seasons will go from alphas to beta seasons, whatever that means really. They're saying over half the content in those seasons will be generated by, there may be, professional development teams who are making it, but they won't be associated with brands. So, brands will still be an important part of it because they've signed all these brand deals and they've just announced sort of, Peaky Blinders has gone live and a few other sort of big brands. Circus du Soleil as well is the big one in season 6. But over 50% will be, non-branded stuff. So I think, that's a change of emphasis. I don't think it necessarily gets more people in, but there we go. And in order to back that up, for every season there will be 2 game jams to encourage new content. There'll be a bigger prize pool, although it's not massive. I think it's about 27 grand. And I'm not quite sure how that's split up, but anyway. But out of the game jams, there will be 10 sort of winners, and they will get. I think they were doing this anyway, but they will get sort of promotion and some professional polish and sort of getting people, trying to push people into those as well. So they said they're going to announce more about how the game jams are going to work sort of in the future. Obviously, this is for next year, but I think it's it is a sign of sort of understanding that their things do have to maybe change is the wrong word, but the emphasis has to should go in a different direction. And obviously they've got all this other stuff with Sandchain. Actually spoke to Sebastian and Robbie the other day, or last week, or was it this week? I can't remember, 2 weeks ago. So it's interesting to sort of get a feel for. I mean, I didn't learn any new information, and there's no secret information, but I did sort of get a feel for what they were trying to do, and we'll see. And the Sandchain is again focused on creators. I mean, again, it's not so much focused on the Sandbox. It's sort of an adjacent technology that could be used in the Sandbox. So there is potential there to bring those two things together. So yeah, we'll see. But I think it's definitely good. Compared to what happened this year, there's definitely been sort of kick up the backside for the Sandbox. So hopefully 2026 will be a bit more dynamic.
You do feel as though when they launch a season and it actually gets some traction, that there is a community there with lots of potential, but by sort of that community kind of feels like it sort of dies off and you don't see much of it in between the seasons. But with maybe more of a focus on UGC, maybe that community will sort of grow stronger and be kind of a bit more consistent. I don't know. Yeah. No,
well, my view has always been that the Sandbox's failure has been concurrency. That, as you say, it gives away a lot of tokens to get people in, and then it just switches it off, and they'll go away and do other things. they would say probably it works so they get a lot of people in because they give away tokens, and if they don't give away tokens, not going to get them in maybe. But I just kind of think you just want to build people whose sort of daily routine is let's go check out what's in the sandbox or weekly, whatever. But to have concurrency is I can go in with one of my kids, and play a game, and they can go to one of their friends. I mean, like they play on Roblox. It's all about social. I mean, and it's clear now the sandbox is not going to compete with Roblox. Roblox is, Roblox was never a little thing, but now it's this gargantuan thing. Even bigger than sort of Fortnite. Although the two are sort of in a sense broadly comparable. The sandbox is not going to be that, so they do have to sort of. But yeah, if you don't have sort of concurrency in your game and you're sort of a multiplayer social game, then platform, then it just seems why are you bothering?
Mm-hmm. Good. Finally, then, coming on to one of our favorite topics. Let's not focus so much on Gala games, I suppose, but that's where it's coming from.
Oh, no.
AG game Spider Tanks announced from Game Media announced this week that it's going to be sort of revived and launched on Immutable on the 8th of December. Is early access is planned, and so that's kind of a win both for Immutable and Spider Tanks, and obviously big loss for Gala, but Gala hasn't.
Well, I mean the Gala thing was So just a quick recap. So Spider Tanks actually, again, sort of writing the article, sort of look back and I think 2022 game. I think I did actually play it quite a bit. So when Gala was sort of really going through, it's like, wow, Gala Games are going to take over the world, sort of thing. The funny thing was there was only basically they had a game called Townstar that was awful. It was their version of Farmville. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't very good. And then this Spider Tanks that was from a third party developer in the Netherlands called Game Media. And again, it didn't blow your socks off. It was sort of like a arena based game where you, as you can imagine, it was like a tank based game, but they had legs. So they didn't have 8 legs. So it was Spider Tanks with only 4 legs. I think they only had 4 legs. The ones I had only had 4 legs. Maybe there was a special one with 8 legs. I don't know. But anyway, so you basically chose some legs, and they were obviously all different attributes. And then you chose like a turret with a gun on it, and obviously there were different attributes and types of guns and stuff. And then I can't remember how many were in an arena, maybe they're different ones, but actually at that point there weren't many people playing, so there wasn't many people in the arena, but you sort of, it's just a PvP, you wander around shooting each other and respawning and collecting points and stuff like that. So I played that quite a lot, PC game, had some NFTs. Obviously you were logging in through Gala's slightly centralized blockchain, and quite what blockchain it was running on. I mean, it wasn't the NFTs were on a blockchain. It wasn't a fully on-chain game, but it was quite good. I never did some videos. I don't know why I never did videos on it. It was sort of weird. I was looking back at my YouTube channel, so I played it quite a lot.
You've not done videos, John. It's not happened.
Yeah, it's not happened. It's happened in my brain. So I think because I was never really, it hadn't gone live, and I was never really convinced that it was like this is a super exciting sort of game, and it wasn't doing anything clever with the blockchain. So I think there was lots of other things for me to talk about. I guess that was it. But anyway, so they had a big bust up with Gala sort of 18 months ago, and they basically said Gala are a bunch of what the word was. Anyway, basically Gala are a bunch of nasty people, and they'd really fallen out. But by that time, everyone had fallen out with Gala, and then hilariously, not hilariously for Game Media at the time, but hilariously, in retrospect, Gala sued them for complaining about their bad business practices, and that case got thrown out immediately because it was obviously just a load of rubbish. And then the Gala co-founders started suing each other, and I don't know what ever happened to that, but anyway, anyway, it was sort of funny to.
That's what they call them. Opportunistic, greedy, and evil is what they called Gala.
Well,
that's what.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good description. I mean, from the outside looking. Anyway, it's not going to Gala again. So we did wonder. So basically, Spider Tank's got this sort of slight sort of not reputation, but slight sort of halo around that they called out Gala, and everyone by that stage had realised Gala was what it was all about, and it wasn't about good games. But Gavidia were a very small company, so I think it took a lot out of them, probably financially and also sort of mentally, having been sued by Gala got loads more money, probably even now. And people did think at the time, Spider Tanks will get picked up because it was still a point where blockchains were buying content. So I don't know why that didn't happen, but it's taken them sort of this time to announce that they're going to Immutable. And I think, as you say, it's obviously good for the media people. They've worked on the game. I think they've been quiet because they've been working on the game. It's not massively changed, but it's updated graphics. They're on mobile now as well, which will be a big thing for them. But Immutable, for all its 637 well-financed games, there's still not anything that's stuck. There's not really anything. I play a lot of games. There's not really anything for on Immutable at the moment where you go, yeah, I'll do anything more than just see if play it once or twice to see how it goes. And Spider Tanks, as I say, it won't blow your socks off, but it is a pretty solid game. I think with its sort of reputation now as it's sort of the game that sort of escaped from Gala and is being rebooted. All communities like that sort of rebirth sort of thing. Blockchain people sort of like that as well. In particular, they've said if you had NFTs and assets, we're gonna bring them over. Quite how they're going to do that, I don't know, because I don't know if I have access to my Gala wallet. I've probably wrote it all down somewhere, but I'd have to go and find it. So I don't quite know how they're going to do that. We'll have to wait and see. But if they can, that'll be great. I think there's some people have spent probably a lot doing that. And then I think it can be this sort of nice launch where everyone sort of at least for a few days or piles in and relives their whether they had played Spider Tanks or not, they can sort of relive that and that brings in sort of new people in. As long as they don't sort of they never had a token, they just had an NFT, so they're probably not going to want a token because they got on Immutable. But it could actually be surprisingly good for Immutable to actually have a decent game that people can play and is multiplayer and sort of fun but not super serious, and you deal with the leaderboards and all that sort of stuff. And so it's definitely a win-win. And I guess when lots of blockchain games are going Web 2 and not doing it anymore, it's sort of quite nice that something is being sort of brought back in a sort of happy story manner.
It's funny because we discussed it a couple of months back. Like Immutable should kind of brand themselves as this blockchain that picks up those games, that are failing to, like we're the Immutable one. So Immutable games should come to us, and this is kind of a good example of that, really. So on that good note, we're going to round up. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week again. Bye bye.